Captain Lee Mio felt his heart racing as he gripped the armrests of his command chair. The deep space exploration vessel Dawn's Promise had been drifting quietly through the empty regions at the edge of the galaxy for 3 long months. They were supposed to be mapping new star systems, looking for planets that might support human life someday. It was routine work, the kind that made crew members sleepy during their shifts. But nothing about this moment was routine. "Captain, you need to see this," Communications Officer Park Jaiwin said, her usually calm voice shaking with excitement and fear. She was staring at her control panel, like it had grown teeth. "The sensors are picking up massive structures. They're bigger than anything we've ever seen. Bigger than moons, sir." Miho leaned forward, watching the main view screen as strange shapes began to appear in the darkness of space around them. At first, they looked like stars, but stars didn't move like this. Stars didn't seem to fold out of nothing, growing larger and brighter until they filled the entire view. "Where did they come from?" asked Chief Engineer Kim Do-hyun, running his hands over his diagnostic equipment. His screens were flashing with readings that made no sense. "Captain, these things weren't there a minute ago. They just appeared." The crew of 12 humans on the bridge stood frozen, watching as enormous crystalline ships materialize around their small vessel. Each ship was the size of a small planet, made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft, colorful light. The light seemed to move in patterns, almost like it was breathing. "Sir," Park Jaiwin called out again, her voice now tight with tension. "We're receiving some kind of transmission, but it's not coming through our radio or quantum communication systems. It's coming directly into our neural interfaces, into our minds." Miho felt a strange tingling at the base of his skull, where his neural implant connected his brain to the ship's computer systems. All space crew had these implants to help them control their vessels more efficiently. But he had never felt anything like this before. It was warm, gentle, like someone was trying to whisper something important but didn't know how to form the words. "Chief Kim, what's our engine status?" Miho asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He had been a starship captain for 15 years, but this situation was unlike anything in his training. Kim Do-hyun shook his head, confusion written across his face. "This is a strange part, sir. Our engines are fine. All systems are working perfectly, but somehow we can't move. It's not like they're jamming our controls or holding us with some kind of tractor beam. It feels more like they're asking us to stay still, to wait." Through the large viewports that surrounded the bridge, the crew could see movement inside the crystal structures. Beings of light and mineral floated through spaces that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. These creatures had forms that shifted and changed, sometimes appearing solid like living rock, other times flowing like liquid starlight. "How old do you think they are?" whispered Navigation Officer Choi Hannah, her eyes wide as she watched the aliens move through their impossible ships. "Older than us," said Medical Officer Yunsora quietly. "Much older. Look at those ships. That technology. They've been traveling between stars since before humans learned to make fire." The aliens seemed to be studying the human ship with the same curiosity that the humans were showing toward them. But there was something different about their attention. It wasn't the cold, scientific observation that one might expect from such an advanced species. There was warmth in it, almost recognition. Deep within the largest of the crystalline vessels, an ancient consciousness stirred. The being known to its kind as the Speaker had lived for over 100 million years. It had watched entire civilizations rise from primitive beginnings, reach for the stars, build vast empires, and then fade into cosmic dust. The Speaker had seen this cycle repeat thousands of times across the galaxy. The Keepers of Memory, as they called themselves, had long ago made a sacred promise never to interfere with younger species. They would observe, they would record, they would remember, but they would not make contact. They had learned through painful experience that their presence often changed the natural development of other civilizations, usually for the worse. For millions of years, the Speaker had followed this law without question. Until now, something about these small, chaotic humans was different. As the Speaker observed their minds through the neural interfaces, it felt emotions it thought had died long ago. These humans showed the same stubborn curiosity that had once driven the Keepers to explore beyond their home world. They displayed the same fierce loyalty to their crewmates, the same willingness to face the unknown despite their fear. The speaker remembered when his own people had been young, when they too had been small and fragile and brave beyond reason. These humans reminded the ancient being of something precious that had been lost in the long centuries of watching and waiting. For the first time in millions of years, the speaker made a decision that went against every law its people had established. It would break the silence. It would make contact. The humans aboard Dawn's Promise had no idea that they were about to become the first species in galactic history that the Keepers of Memory had chosen to call family. Captain Lee Miho blinked and suddenly found himself somewhere impossible. One moment he had been standing on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by his crew and the familiar hum of the Dawn's Promise. Now he stood in a place that looked like no library he had ever seen before. The walls around him were made of crystal, but not dead crystal like the kind found in caves on Earth. This crystal was alive. It pulsed with soft light that changed colors like a slow heartbeat. The light moved through the walls in gentle waves, carrying what looked like information, like thoughts made visible. Shelves stretched up higher than he could see, filled not with books but with glowing orbs of different sizes and colors. Each orb seemed to contain memories, experiences, entire lifetimes of knowledge from across the galaxy. The air itself seemed to whisper with the voices of 1,000,000 different worlds. "Do not be afraid," came a voice that did not reach his ears but spoke directly into his mind. The voice was old, incredibly old, but it was kind. "We mean you no harm." Lee Miho turned toward the voice and saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. A being was taking shape before him, forming itself from light and living crystal. It was tall, much taller than any human, and its body seemed to be made of the same glowing mineral as the library around them. But it was the eyes that struck him most. They were ancient eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars, that had watched entire civilizations rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore. "We are the Keepers of Memory," the being said. "I am the one my people call the Speaker. I have lived for more years than your species has existed, and I have watched your kind since you first built ships that could carry you beyond your home world." Miho felt his heart racing. He looked around and saw that he was not alone. Navigation Officer Choi Hannah stood to his left, her eyes wide with wonder as she took an impossible library. Security Chief Nam Kyungmin was on his right, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that was not there, then relaxing as he realized this place held no threat. "How are we here?" Choi Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are we still on our ship?" "Your bodies remain where they were," the speaker explained patiently. "We have brought your consciousness here, to a place between spaces, where we can speak without the barriers that separate our kinds. Do not worry. You are safe." The ancient being moved closer, and Miho could feel emotions that were not his own flowing through his mind. Confusion, wonder, and something that felt almost like joy. After so many millions of years of watching other species from a distance, the speaker was finally talking to someone. "We have observed 10 million cycles of galactic history," the speaker continued. "We have seen thousands of species reach the stars. Most follow the same path. They discover fire, then tools, then weapons. They conquer their homeworlds, then reach out to conquer others. They build great empires that burn bright and fast, then collapse into dust and memory." As the speaker spoke, images appeared in the crystal walls around them. Miho and his officers watched as civilizations they had never heard of played out their histories in fast motion. Species that looked like giant insects building hive cities that covered entire planets. Beings of pure energy creating art from the light of stars themselves. Creatures with too many eyes and not enough limbs developing mathematics, so complex it hurt to look at. All of them followed the same pattern. Growth, expansion, war, collapse, extinction. "But you are different," the speaker said, and its ancient voice carried a note of something that sounded almost like hope. "When we first observed your species, we expected to see the same story play out again. But instead, we saw something we had not witnessed since our own people were young." Nam Kyung-min stepped forward, his training as a security officer making him protective of his captain and crewmate. "What did you see in us?" The speaker's form grew brighter, and through their mental connection, All three humans could feel the emotions of thousands of other keepers watching this moment. There was excitement there and anticipation, and something that felt like the memory of loneliness finally coming to an end. "You burn with the same fire we once carried," the speaker said. "Your species shows patterns we have not seen since our own youth. You have the same stubborn refusal to give up when everything seems hopeless. You have the same ability to find hope in the darkest places. Most importantly, you have the same fierce need to protect those you call your own." Joy Hannah felt tears forming in her eyes as she experienced flashes of the speaker's memories. She saw the keepers when they were younger, when they still had physical bodies like humans, when they too had been explorers and dreamers reaching for distant stars. "You were like us once," she said softly. "Yes," the speaker replied. "And in watching you, we remember what we used to be. For millions of years, we thought we were alone in our way of thinking, alone in our capacity for growth without destruction. We became observers because we believed no other species could follow the path we had chosen." Lee Miho straightened his shoulders, drawing on all the courage that had carried him from a small city on Earth to the captain's chair of a deep space exploration vessel. He looked directly into those ancient, star-filled eyes and made a decision that would change both their species forever. "Then, perhaps," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, "it's time we got to know each other." The archive chamber was larger than any building that had ever been constructed on Earth. Tactical Officer Song Jiho stood with his mouth open, trying to understand what he was seeing. The room stretched in all directions, filled with floating displays that showed moving pictures of worlds and creatures he could never have imagined. Medical Officer Yun Sora walked slowly between the displays, watching as entire civilizations played out their stories in fast motion. She saw beings that looked like walking trees building cities in clouds. She watched creatures made of metal and circuits creating art from pure mathematics. Each display showed a different world, a different species, a different way of life. "This is incredible," she whispered, reaching out to touch one of the holographic images. Her hand passed right through it, but she could feel warm from the light. "How many species have you recorded?" The speaker moved gracefully between the displays, its crystalline form reflecting the light from thousands of alien worlds. "We have watched and recorded the histories of over 1 million different civilizations across this galaxy alone, each one unique, each one precious in its own way." Song Jio stopped in front of a display, showing a species that looked somewhat like humans, but with arms and skin that changed colors. He watched as they built great cities, then ships that could travel between stars, then weapons that could destroy planets. "They all seem to follow the same story," he said, a note of sadness in his voice. "They grow, they spread out across space, they fight wars, and then they disappear." "Yes," the speaker replied, and even though it had no physical voice, Song Jiho could hear the weight of millions of years in that single word. Most species follow very predictable paths. They discover technology, they expand beyond their home worlds, they conquer everything they can reach, and then they grow tired and stagnant. Eventually, they fade away and die out. The displays around them shifted, showing the pattern again and again, species after species reaching for the stars, building great empires, then collapsing under their own weight. It was like watching the same sad movie play out with different actors. Science Officer Han Juno had been studying the data streams that flowed through the crystal walls like rivers of light. He was a scientist, trained to look for patterns and exceptions, and something had caught his attention. "But you didn't follow that pattern," he said, looking directly at the speaker. "You survived when all these others didn't. What made you different?" The speaker's form pulsed with a soft, melancholy light. Around them, the displays began to change, showing images that were much older than the others. These showed creatures that looked more solid, more physical than the crystalline beings they had become. "These are us," the speaker explained. "This is what my people looked like millions of years ago, when we were young and new to the galaxy." Yun Sora gasped as she watched the ancient keepers in their original forms. They had bodies somewhat like humans, but taller and more graceful. Their skin seemed to be made of living stone that sparkled in the light of their home star. They built cities of incredible beauty, developed technology that seemed like magic, and reached out to explore the space around their world with the same excitement that now drove human explorers. "You were like us," she said softly. "You had the same dreams, the same curiosity." "Yes," the speaker agreed. "We were driven by the same restless energy that now pushes your species across the galaxy. We wanted to see everything, to learn everything, to experience all that the universe had to offer." Han Juno leaned forward, studying the ancient images more carefully. "But something changed for you. You made different choices than the other species. You survived when they didn't." The displays shifted again, showing the turning point in keeper history. Song Jiho watched as the ancient keepers faced the same crossroads that had destroyed so many other civilizations. They could choose to conquer the galaxy, to build an empire based on force and domination, or they could choose a different path. "We learned to choose growth over conquest," the speaker explained. "We chose curiosity over domination. Instead of consuming everything we found, we chose to preserve it. Instead of destroying other species, we chose to study them and learn from them." The images showed the keepers transforming themselves, giving up their physical bodies to become beings of living crystal and energy. They became immortal, capable of surviving in the cold vacuum of space, able to watch and record without interfering. "But that choice came with a price," the speaker continued, and its crystalline form dimmed with ancient sadness. "In choosing to preserve rather than consume, we became observers instead of participants. We watched life happen around us, but we stopped living it ourselves. For millions of years, we thought we were the only species capable of making that choice, the only ones who could grow without destroying." Communications Officer Park Jaiwin had been quiet during most of this conversation, but now she stepped forward and activated her personal data storage. Through her neural interface, she began sharing images and information from Earth and the human colonies. The Keeper archive displays suddenly filled with scenes from human history. The speaker and the human officers watched as humans worked together to clean up environmental damage on Earth, as space colonies welcomed refugees from failed worlds, as the Terra Accords established principles for peaceful expansion across the galaxy. "Look at this," Park Jaiwin said, highlighting images of humans from different planets working side by side. "We've made mistakes, many mistakes, but we keep trying to do better. We choose cooperation over conquest, curiosity over control." The speaker's crystalline form began to glow brighter as it absorbed the information. Through their mental connection, the humans could feel the emotions of thousands of other keepers throughout the fleet as they too experienced these images of human cooperation and hope. "You're not alone anymore," Park Jaiwin said softly, her voice filled with warmth and understanding. "You don't have to be just observers. You can be participants again. You can be family." For the first time in millions of years, the ancient beings felt something they had almost forgotten how to experience: hope for the future. The debate among the keepers had been going on for hours, their crystalline forms pulsing with different colors as they argued. Some of the ancient beings believed that sharing their memories with the humans would be dangerous, that it might change both species in ways they could not predict. But the speaker had made its decision. For the first time in millions of years, it was willing to take a risk. Captain Lee Miho stood in a chamber that looked like the inside of a giant crystal cave. The walls curved around him in smooth, flowing lines that seemed to breathe with their own inner light. Chief Engineer Kim Do-hein was beside him, running his hands nervously through his hair as he tried to understand what was about to happen. Cultural Specialist Lim Soyoung stood quietly, her eyes bright with excitement and curiosity. "What you are about to experience has never been shared with another species," the speaker said, its voice echoing strangely in the crystal chamber. "You will see through our eyes, feel through our hearts, live moments from our long history, as if they were your own memories." 3 crystalline interfaces descended from the ceiling, looking like beautiful sculptures made of living light. They moved slowly toward the humans, stopping just in front of each person's forehead. "Will it hurt?" Kim Do-hein asked. His engineer's mind always worried about the technical details. "No," the speaker assured him. "It will feel like remembering dreams you never knew you had." The interfaces touched their foreheads gently, and suddenly the 3 humans were no longer standing in the crystal chamber. They were floating in space, but not the cold, empty space they knew from their ship. This was space as the keepers experienced it, filled with currents of energy and streams of information that flowed like rivers of light. Lee Miho gasped as he felt himself becoming part of a memory that was millions of years old. He was a young keeper, still in physical form, standing on the surface of their home world as they launched their first spacecraft beyond their own solar system. The excitement, the fear, the desperate hope that they were not alone in the universe washed over him like a warm wave. Kim Do-hyun found himself experiencing the moment when the keepers discovered their first alien civilization. He felt their wonder at finding that life could take form so different from their own, and their sadness when that civilization destroyed itself in war just a few thousand years after first contact. Lim Soyoung lived through the great philosophical debates that had shaped Keeper society. She felt the weight of the decision to give up their physical forms, to become immortal observers rather than active participants in galactic life. She experienced their grief at watching species after species follow the same path to extinction. But there were beautiful moments, too. Lee Miho felt the joy of the first keeper who learned to make music from the radiation of stars, turning the energy of distant suns into melodies that could touch the heart. Kim Do-hyun experienced the moment when the keepers chose mercy over revenge against the species that had attacked them, deciding instead to help their enemies find a better path. The memories flowed through them for what felt like hours, giving them a deep understanding of what it meant to be a keeper, to carry the responsibility of preserving galactic history while watching civilizations rise and fall like flowers blooming and dying in an endless cycle. When the memories finally stopped, the three humans found themselves back in the crystal chamber, tears running down their faces as they tried to process everything they had experienced. "Now," the speaker said gently, "we would like to experience yours." This time, it was the humans who shared. Through the crystalline interfaces, they opened their hearts and minds to the ancient beings, letting them feel what it meant to be human. The keepers experienced human music for the first time, and the effect was immediate. Throughout the fleet, crystalline forms began to resonate with the melodies, creating harmonies that had never existed before. They felt the strange power of songs that could make people laugh or cry, that could bring comfort in times of sorrow or inspire courage in moments of fear. Kim Do-hyun shared memories of his 5-year-old daughter, Lee Gina, running through their apartment on the Mars colony, her laughter echoing off the walls as she chased their family cat. The sound of that innocent joy rippled through the keeper collective consciousness, like stones dropped in still water, causing waves of happiness that some of them had not felt since their own youth millions of years ago. Lim Soyoung offered stories of families that had nothing to do with genetics or biology. She shared memories of orphan children finding homes with people who chose to love them, of refugees from destroyed worlds being welcomed into communities that treated them like blood relatives, of friendships so strong that they became bonds closer than any biological relationship. The keepers experienced acts of human kindness that defied logic, strangers helping strangers with no expectation of reward, communities coming together to rebuild after natural disasters, working side by side regardless of their differences. Soldiers choosing to risk their own lives to protect people they had never met. "This is what you call love," the speaker said, and its voice was filled with wonder. Not just the love between those who share blood, but the love that is chosen, given freely to those who need it. "Yes," Lim Soyoung replied softly, "we call it family. And family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who you choose to care for, who you choose to protect, who you choose to call your own." Throughout the Keeper fleet, ancient beings who had spent millions of years as solitary observers felt something they thought they had lost forever. They felt like they belonged somewhere. They felt like they had found their way home. "We understand now," the speaker whispered, its crystalline form glowing brighter than it had in eons. "Family is not just genetic inheritance. It is choice. It is recognition. It is love freely given." For the first time in millions of years, the keepers knew they were not alone. Captain Lee Miho pressed his face against the cool glass of the observation deck and smiled. 6 months ago, he had been commanding a small exploration ship at the edge of known space. Now he was standing in the most amazing structure ever built by two species working together. The station harmony was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. Parts that looked like a normal space station, with metal corridors and rooms filled with familiar equipment. But other parts flowed like living crystal, with walls that glowed softly and changed color based on the emotions of the people inside them. The two different styles of building worked together perfectly, creating something beautiful and functional that neither species could have made alone. Through the large windows, Lee Miho could see the recreational areas where the most wonderful sight in the galaxy was taking place. Human children were playing games with young Keeper entities, their laughter mixing with the musical light patterns that the Keeper youth used to communicate. His own son, Lee Jamin, who was 7 years old, was currently engaged in what appeared to be a very serious game of tag with a juvenile Keeper named Lightweaver. The young Keeper looked like a small crystal sculpture that could move and change shape, creating patterns of blue and gold light to show when it was happy or excited. "Dad, look what Lightweaver taught me," Jamin called out, running up to the observation window. He held up a small device that projected holographic images in the air. "We can make pictures with light now." Lee Miho watched his son create a simple drawing of their old home on Earth using nothing but colored light, while his Keeper friend added sparkles and moving stars to make it more beautiful. The sight filled him with a happiness so deep it almost hurt. In another part of the station, Chief Medical Officer Yoon Sora was working in the combined medical facility. She stood next to a Keeper healer named Memory Keeper, watching as they treated a human engineer who had been injured in a construction accident. The crystalline regeneration field is helping his bones heal much faster than normal human medicine would allow, Yoon Sora said, making notes on her tablet. "But we need to be careful with the dosage. Human bodies react differently than yours do." Memory Keepers form pulse with gentle green light, indicating agreement and concentration. "Your surgical techniques are much more precise than our traditional methods," the Keeper healer responded through their shared communication device. "Together, we can help people in ways neither of us could alone." They had already saved dozens of lives from both species using their combined knowledge. Humans who would have died from injuries were healed using Keeper regeneration technology. Keepers who had been damaged in accidents were repaired using human surgical precision and engineering solutions. But their peaceful work was about to be interrupted. Science Officer Han Juno burst into medical bay, his face pale with worry. "Dr. Yoon, we need you in the main control room immediately. The long-range sensors have detected something moving in the void sectors." The void sectors were areas of space that seemed to be completely empty, with no stars, no planets, no life of any kind. The Keepers had always avoided these regions, and now Han Juno understood why. In the main control room, dozens of humans and Keepers worked side by side, their different technologies combining to create the most advanced sensor network ever built. Navigation Officer Choi Hanna stood next to a Keeper strategist named Pathfinder, both of them studying readings that made no sense. "It's moving toward populated systems," Choi Hanna said, her voice tight with concern. "Whatever it is, it's huge, bigger than anything we've ever seen." The speaker materialized in the center of the room, its ancient form pulsing with colors that indicated deep worry. "This is the threat we have feared for millions of years," it said, its voice reaching every mind in the room simultaneously. "And force that consumes entire civilizations, that has destroyed whole sections of the galaxy in the distant past." Engineer Kim Do-hyun looked up from a workstation where he was trying to adapt Keeper defensive technology for human ships. "How did previous civilizations fight it?" "They didn't," the speaker replied sadly. "Every species that encountered this force was destroyed. We Keepers survived only by hiding, by running away and never fighting back." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this terrible information. An enemy that had never been defeated, that had consumed entire galactic arms, was now heading toward the systems where billions of humans and other species lived. But then cultural specialist Lim Soyoung stood up from her workstation, a determined smile on her face. "That was before," she said firmly, "those other species faced this threat alone. But we won't be alone, will we?" The speaker's crystalline form began to glow brighter as it understood what she meant. "No," it said, and for the first time in millions of years, its voice carried no fear. "We will not be alone." Over the next several weeks, as they prepared for the coming conflict, something remarkable happened. Humans and Keepers worked together with the natural ease of family members. They shared ideas, combined technologies, and supported each other through the fear and stress of preparation. "We stand together now," the speaker declared during one of their planning meetings, its form resonating with determination, not as two species bound by necessity, but as family bound by choice. Lim Soyoung nodded, watching as her human colleagues collaborated with their keeper partners like siblings who had known each other all their lives. "Together, we're stronger than the sum of our parts." The keepers, who had spent millions of years preserving the past, began to believe in the future again, and humanity, for the first time since reaching the stars, knew they were not alone in the vast darkness. The oldest species in the galaxy had called humans family, and together they had found their way home.